Good evening, everyone. We're going to be, hopefully let people in as they join. Tonight has a very special topic, and I imagine it's a topic that has scared a few people away from participating live. Although Torah is always something that we should participate in no matter what. And there's no busha, there's no embarrassment when it comes to Torah. This is our three-part series on life cycles and life changes. And I have the privilege of introducing a very good friend and a special guest, a big Talmid Chacham, Rabbi Aaron Kraft, who was formerly the Rosh Chabura in the YU Torah Tzidon Kollel and Musmach Habash University, is currently one of the Dayanim at the Chicago Rabbinical Council, the local Beit Din. And the Chicago Rabbinical Council, Beit Din, deals with a number of different things. Most people in the world probably only know the CRC as a kashrus agency, but locally, the CRC plays a lot of important roles. One of them is to have a regular court for adjudicating cases of, uh, of financial cases of monetary law, but also when it comes to dealing with conversion and divorce. And tonight's topic, we're going to be talking about the third topic, which again, of course, is one that is often so fraught with difficulty because it comes up in such difficult times in people's lives, but also because it's something that is very unknown and there's a lot of fear surrounding it. So the topic tonight is the halachic and ethical divorce, and we're going to be conducting this sort of conversational interview style with Rabbi Kraft. And I'll just before we introduce Rabbi Kraft and sort of turn the floor over to him with our Q&A. What I'm going to be doing, first of all, the questions are submitted to me in advance, and I'm going to be asking these questions to Rabbi Kraft. But also, I want to just frame the conversation about divorce. Yes, of course, the stigma. Of course, it's a difficult topic. It comes up in contentious times. And the Gemara, in the end of Gittin, famously tells us that when a couple is divorced, so it's the mizbeach that we're going to read about in this week and next week. Mizbeach is the altar. It's the considered the part in which we interact with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the holiest part of the Beit Hamikdash, the holiest part of the temple. The mizbeach is yored demos. What that means is that it's like a physical object. An altar is shedding tears. That's the incredible imagery that we have around so we don't around divorce. So we don't speak about Jewish divorce flippantly as if it was a lighthearted matter, as if it was sort of business as usual. Of course, the other hand, in the Catholic world, for many years, is sort of shunned divorce as something that was not even part of the lexicon. It could not have taken place. Famously, um, uh, famously, I think it was Henry VIII, I believe, used the fact that Judaism supported a modality of divorce to justify his own divorce. So this is something that is certainly part of our tradition. It's certainly a mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah we relish, but it's an important one. And at its core is not only a person's sense of fulfillment and happiness, but the sanctity of Jewish life and Jewish marriage. And so, with that, I will begin our conversation with Rabbi Aaron Kraft, and I thank you for joining us tonight. So, Rabbi Kraft, I'm going to spotlight you. And the question I'm going to ask you first is, how does someone know when it's time to get a divorce? I know it's a question, seems a lot to ask you, but in other words, how do we know in the eyes of halacha, in the eyes of Jewish tradition, when it's appropriate and when it's just an argument?
So first of all, thank you, Rabbi Gelman, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to engage in this conversation with you. Like you said, it's a topic which is very important. It's not always, cheerful to talk about because, as we know, it comes up in contentious times, and is not something that we anticipate or hope a marriage will end with, but is obviously critical because when a marriage is not working and is not able to uphold the sanctity and the sacredness that that the marriage bond really is supposed to be in halacha and in our Torah lives. So then, of course, it's a necessary mitzvah, like you said. In terms of from the standpoint of halacha, how do we figure out in halacha's eyes when is an appropriate time to get divorced? So it's interesting. The Gemara that you mentioned at the end of Gittin is really coming on a three-way machlokas between the various Tanaim, Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai, Rabbi Akiva, and they all try to pinpoint varying signs when a man is justified in delivering a get to his wife, and they pick on different things as is it does it have to be adultery? Does it have to be that there is a neglect of the duties of the expected duties of a married couple? Is it just that the couple decides that they found a more desirable partner? What type of justification, so to speak, does one need in order to get? But the Ramah, Moshe Isserlis, in his comments in the Shulchan Aruch, already points out that the truth is that all of these various factors, as factors in their own right, as a bona fide criteria, is really irrelevant, because nowadays we don't actually do divorce against people's will. It used to be that the divorce was really solely done by the man. The man would give a get to his wife. That was what effectuated the divorce. And so nowadays, that's not how we operate. Nowadays, divorce is really more of a mutual, consensual type of institution. And so the Rama points out that it's really difficult to identify a particular factor that would say, that we would say in halacha that one must or one should or one is justified in giving a divorce. So what the post can really talk about, and this is found in a number of different shuvas, Rav Moshe has a shuva about it, where he talks about the idea that if there is a marriage that is not going well, that there have been many years of discord and of fighting, of contentiousness, and the couple has been, Rav Moshe uses the duration, the couple has been separated for 18 months. So then Rav Moshe writes that they should go to a beis din, and if the beis din deems that it's appropriate, they should get divorced. However, the post can point out that really even that, it's not a scientific formula. It's really a function of the fact that we believe in the fact that Rav Moshe puts this duration and talks about many years of contentiousness, etc., is really a testament to the fact that we really do believe in putting an effort into a marriage, that the marriage is a sacred bond, and so therefore a couple really should think long and hard and really go to extreme measures to try and salvage a marriage, even if it doesn't seem to be working out in the ideal way that everyone envisioned when it first started. But at a certain point in time, if it is deemed that it is no longer functional, it is not a marriage that is productive, it's not a marriage that is serving the better needs of the couple, of the family, so then a divorce is appropriate, and it's appropriate that that be done in consultation with therapists, with rabbinic mentors, and even perhaps the beis din themselves may weigh in on the particulars of any given case.
So thank you for that answer. I think that sometimes, just my experience as a Rav, and I know that interacting with the beis din, that in accordance with what you're saying, we will actually it's not we discourage or encourage divorce, but the moment someone says I want to get a divorce, it's not necessarily the next step immediately, right? So there's a process. So how does one initiate and walk us through, I guess, what happens when someone will contact the rabbi? The rabbi will say, well, you have to, if they may have to contact the beis din at that point. That might be the next phone call. I'll just say before it gets to the beis din, sometimes I'll have a conversation or multiple conversations with the couple. We'll refer them out to a therapist. There are many steps before they even get to the beis din. But let's say now they're coming to the beis din, right? They're at the point where they think they're going forward with this, or at least one partner is. Walk us through how the divorce is initiated.
Sure. So I think the most important point is the one that you mentioned, which is really that before it comes to the beis din, there's really a lot of consultation and support, and the family's Rav, often the shul rabbi. Sometimes families have other mentors that they really look up to. Really a lot of that is provided, that support and that guidance is provided by the rabbi, and the rabbi really remains a critical figure in the process, as it continues. Once it's been determined that the correct step is really to go and initiate a formal divorce proceedings in the beis din. So generally speaking, either the rabbi or either of the couples will either call the beis din. You can go on to the CRC website, go onto the beis din website. There is an actual a form that can be filed requesting for the divorce proceedings to begin. And generally, once it's gotten to the Beis Din will try to ascertain to just make sure that the necessary steps have been taken. But once it really gets to the Beis Din, we don't view ourselves as the therapist, as the counselors. We want to make sure that the due diligence was done and that the necessary steps were taken. But once it's filed with the Beis Din or someone's coming to the Beis Din, so then it really does kind of turn into the more technical procedural realm where we will initiate the actual proceedings. And the proceedings are really divided. And I'm sure as we continue the conversation, we'll be able to get in some more of the nuts and bolts of the different aspects. But there are really a few different features to it. There is one feature, which is the get itself, and when is the appropriate time to give the get. And then there's the other aspect in terms of the financial arrangements, if it's a couple with children, so custodial considerations, and the civil proceedings. And sometimes all of these things are taken care of, are done in Beis Din, and sometimes part of these things are dealt with in the Beis Din, and part of them are dealt with in either mediation or in civil arbitration. And we can kind of talk about those steps as we go on.
Is there a cost involved, or is this a service of the Beis Din? Like, how does that work, and why are we paying money? Where's the money going to?
Okay, so that's a great question. So first of all, for those of us who live in Chicago, so we are very lucky that the CRC, as far as I know, is one of the lowest cost involved with the divorce proceedings. There is a cost involved, but many of the Bati Din, I think, are close to double, if not more, of what it costs to go through the divorce proceeding at the CRC. At the CRC, the basic cost is a $150 filing fee that is just to open the case, and really that's to cover the overhead in terms of the back end, the office logistics that go into arranging for all of the necessary parties to be present and to engage in the various aspects of the get. And then the remainder is paid after the proceedings itself. There are times when, for various reasons, the couple will not actually appear in front of the Beis Din for the get itself at the same time, and rather the husband will appear and the get will be written, and he'll appoint a messenger or shliach to deliver the get, in which case there has to be like a second proceeding where the wife will be present to receive the get. If that's done, it's a little bit more expensive. I think it's like an extra $100 or something, but you're talking about somewhere in the range of $375 to like $450, depending on the exact circumstances, all said and done. The reason the historically the cost, when they talk about the Mishnayos and the Gemara that talk about Gittin, the cost is really to go to pay the sofer to write the get. The get is a formal document, and it is written by a sofer. Each get, it's not a form that you can just fill out. You fill in the names. That doesn't work like that. It has to be written specifically for each couple. And the sofer writes the get, and the Gemara talks about how the sofer has to get paid. And in theory, it really is the husband's responsibility to pay the sofer. However, the rabbis came along and they instituted that because if there was going to be a cost involved and the husband was going to be required to not only give the get but also to pay for the get, there was a concern that the money would deter him, and then if he would be deterred by the money, he might not give a get, and then his wife might end up being an guna chas v'shalom for a very long period of time. So Chazal actually flipped everything on its head and decided that really I'm sorry about that. And decided that really the tzakana should be that that the wife pays for the get. However, in the common practice in our Batei Din is that the sofer is really not paid directly for the get. We have a sofer who's on staff at the CRC, and he really is going to write he's there to write gittin when necessary, and he does that regardless of payment. And the fee is really towards the Beis Din for the general overhead costs, etc. And what we do is we generally split it between the couple. We'll split it between the couple if, for whatever reason, one part, there's a financial difficulty, or if one party is refusing to pay. So then we generally are very accommodating. We can set up payment plans. We give discounts. We're really the idea is really that this should be a service that is available to people when it's necessary, and so cost should never be a factor involved in making this decision.
I just want to say when you talk about not paying that our sofer is on staff, I've had I guess the opportunity. But it's a difficult opportunity. But as a rabbi, you have to be with the couple and families sometimes in difficult times also to sit there during a get proceeding. And the sofer, just to be clear, writes the document there on the spot. It's not like a ksuva where you have it done months in advance and it comes in all beautiful and it's wrapped up in cellophane and he's writing it there. And so it's a lengthy wait. It's sort of like this long process. You're there for maybe about, it could be half an hour to 45 minutes while he writes up the document in the middle of the proceeding, in addition to the whole process. So there is a significant amount of labor involved in this process. Just so people should know, it's not something you download a form, you fill in the blanks like you were going to a court. Um, so so I guess in addition to the proceeding itself, the actual get, but how long is the whole process from start to finish? Person applies for a get, and then they have to. So what then has to happen? In other words, how long is that going to take?
So yeah, so meaning there's really not an easy answer for like a one a one answer fits all for every case. Every case is very very different. In theory, if it's clear that the divorce is happening, the main thing that must happen from our perspective before the get is given, the most important component is that the couple must be separated. They can't be living in the same quarters. So if the couple is no longer living in the same quarters, so then from our perspective, the get is ready to be given, and so we can schedule the get. It could be a matter of days, or even less. It can be done very, it could be done, it can be done very quickly. We fit into the schedule, make sure that all the parties that need to be present are present, and take care of it. Like Rabbi Gelman said, the process itself is about an hour and a half. But from start to finish, from filing till the end of that process, it really depends. There are other times where many things can get in the way, and people are have various concerns about the process in terms of working out different disputes that have to be dealt with, and there are different perspectives that people take. Our perspective is always, I'm sure we'll talk about this, but our perspective is always that the get really should be given once there's a clear decision that the couple wants to get divorced and they're no longer living together. It is best to just to do the get as soon as possible. We have times where, for various reasons, the get gets delayed, and sometimes the person the couple will decide, okay, we're going to do the get right now. We'll arrange it in a matter of a half an hour. We'll get everybody together and say, this is the only opportunity. It must get done. We don't want to miss this opportunity, so we don't care if it's in the middle of the day. We'll drop everything and do it, or we don't care if we have to come on a Sunday morning or a Saturday night or whatever it might be. If this is what's going to take to make sure it gets done, so then that's what we'll do to make sure that nobody is left without stuck without a get.
So in addition to writing the document, the sofer, so what else happens at the proceeding? You arrive on the appointed date. Let's say the couple's there. What walk us through from the beginning of the get to the end.
So it's a pretty straightforward proceeding. The truth is that the entirety of the proceeding from start to finish is actually literally scripted out. Even when the couple comes in, we actually use the mashal of it's as if it's a play almost. The proceeding is very precise. And so there are many components which I'll talk about right now. But these components, it's very important that they all be done in the exact fashion, with the exact right formulation, and in the right order, etc. So we really actually literally hand a script to the various participants. And so when the couple arrives, the first steps is that they have to identify themselves. If they are not people that are familiar to the Dayanim, so they identify themselves using a formal form of ID, either a passport or a driver's license. Once they've identified themselves, historically, and this is really going all the way up until COVID time. What would happen is that the Beis Din would meet with each party to determine the exact right name that needed to be written in the get. There are very specific rules in terms of how to write each person's name and to make sure that we're identifying each party 100% correctly without any shadow of a doubt of who is being referred to. So we include names and nicknames and the parents' names and the parents' nicknames. So it has to be done in a very particular way. And so it used to be that the Beis Din would actually meet with the parties and discuss and make sure that they had the names done correctly, and they would do it right then on the spot. When COVID came around and we were trying to figure out ways to truncate the proceedings and make them shorter. So one of the things that we decided to do is that we schedule phone calls with each of the parties before the actual date to go over the names in order to get the exact formulation of the names in advance. So we actually just kind of kept that from COVID, that as we were trying to keep things a little bit shorter. So we actually found that that's actually pretty convenient to have all the names done and they can all be written
So
out.
so many times the best practices were brought to
Right.
our various
Yep.
industries through COVID. So that's a
Yeah,
great example.
100%. So that's this is you can add this one to the list. So now we get the names before the proceedings actually start. So when the couple comes in, once they've identified themselves, so we'll actually just jump right in to the actual proceeding. And the first part of the proceeding really involves we'll give an overview so that everybody kind of understands what to expect. And the first part is that the husband will be asked a series of questions to make sure that the husband is giving the get of his own volition without any conditions attached to it. And this is that it's intended for the purpose of divorcing his wife. Once that has been established with beyond the shadow of any doubt. So then the husband will go ahead and he will actually acquire the writing materials. We have writing materials that are in the Beis Din. The husband has to own all of the writing materials in order for the get to be delivered to his wife. So he'll acquire those materials and he will appoint the sofer, the scribe, to write the get. He will appoint the edim and the witnesses to sign the get and to be witnesses of the delivery of the get. And once all of that has been done, again, with very particular, precise formulations, so that's when the scribe will then sit down and he will make some declarations in terms of making sure that it's very clear that he has intent to write this get for the couple that is appearing in front of the Beis Din at that time. And he will go ahead and write he'll sit down and write it. And Rabbi Aaron mentioned it's about 30 to 35 minutes on average to write the get. It's a 12-line document, which basically just outlines that this couple is appearing in front of the Beis Din on this and this day of the month, and in this place in Chicago, and they are here because they are going to get divorced according to the laws of Moshe and Yisrael, and that the wife is going to then be divorced from her husband and untied and free to marry anybody. That's spelled out in the get. Once the sofer has written the get, it goes through a series of analytical evaluation. The edim have to look over the get very carefully. The dayanim have to look over the get very carefully to make sure that there are no mistakes, nothing that is that could invalidate the get. You want to make sure that it's done 100% correctly. And once the get has been approved by all the various parties, so then the edim will also make a declaration that they're signing the document with intent under the instruction of and with intent for this particular couple who is there at the Beis Din, and they will sign the get. Once the get is signed, it is then ready to be delivered. Before the delivery, the judges of the Beis Din, the dayanim, will actually, we call it an interrogation. They'll interrogate the scribe, they'll interrogate the witnesses to make sure that the scribe and the witnesses all signed the get and wrote the get with proper intention for the right purpose for the right couple, and they will verify that this was all done correctly. It will then be read out loud to make sure that we have the proper document in hand, and then it is given to the husband to deliver to his wife. He will first verify that he is still giving the get without any conditions and of his own volition. And the wife will also be asked to make sure that she is willing to accept the get without any conditions and of her own volition. If there are any financial disputes or any other disputes that have not yet been settled, we will at the time make sure that they either waive those disputes, or that they acknowledge that the giving of the get is completely separate. It has nothing to do with whatever outcomes will take place regarding custody of children or financial matters or whatever it might be. The get is completely separate. The get is then and that the husband then actually just reads a formulaic statement that he is divorcing his wife, drops the get into his wife's hand in front of the witnesses and of the Beis Din, and that effectuates the actual divorce. The get itself remains in the possession of the Beis Din, so that there is no chance that at a later point in time someone will scrutinize the get and find some sort of mistake or invalidation. It remains in the Beis Din, and the Beis Din sends the
Unlike the
couple.
common practice at weddings, too, for rabbis to scrutinize the ksuva that the Rav wrote, which
Correct.
is
100%. Right. Once this get is done, it is folded up. They actually make a little rip in it to show that it was given correctly. And once that takes place, it is not looked at again. It's not, they read it afterwards just to verify that it's the right get was given over. Once it's been verified, there's a rip, it's folded up, and it's kept on file, never to be looked at again, to make sure that there's no questions arise later on. And the couple
might need it for
receives
if I'm remarrying a person who's getting remarried, I'm going to need a copy from the Beis Din, right? The testament. What will the Beis Din send me?
100%. So the Beis Din will send what is called a patur. It is a one-page document with the seal of the Beis Din on it, which basically just states that so and so was divorced in the Beis Din on this day, and the divorce was done according to the laws of the Torah, and they are now permitted to go ahead and remarry. One will be sent to the man, one will be sent to the woman, and that is what they have for their record. So, like the Rabbi Gelman said, if they come to the rabbi later on to get remarried, the rabbi can verify that they are indeed no longer married to their original spouse. Usually, that document is only given to the various parties once the civil divorce has been finalized. That's just a way for the Beis Din to kind of, stay clear of any legal issues where somebody goes ahead and takes the tour and then has a rabbi marry them, and then someone brings a lawsuit for polygamy because they weren't actually civilly divorced, and then we get in trouble. So we, generally speaking, don't send that out until everything has been finalized.
So is the position of the Beis Din that we try to have the civil divorce and the get done at the same time? Is there a preference? One comes before the other? Does it really depend upon the case?
So to a certain extent, like everything else, there always could be certain factors or features of a particular case which would change the direction in one way or another. But as a general rule, many Batei Din, and this is certainly the position of the CRC Beis Din, as a general rule, we do not have a preference that the get should be given at a particular time or in conjunction with a particular event, that it has to coincide with the civil divorce, or that there should be certain matters that have disputes or what have you that need to be figured out. We don't say, oh, figure things out and then give the get. Our position is always that the get should be given as once the couple knows that they're no longer going to be married and they're no longer living together. At that point in time, the get in our position is the get should be given, and everything else will be worked out. There are cases where sometimes a divorce settlement agreement will include, we have particular language that makes sure that the divorce settlement agreement won't be filed until the get is given, if for whatever reason the get was not given previously. But as a general rule, we try and steer clear of having the get hanging over anybody's head throughout the duration of the rest of the process, and that's for various reasons. I don't know if you want
Matter
me to get
of
into that or
practice,
you want to save that for later.
right, probably. I think, but as a matter of practice, I don't think I don't officiate over a wedding where they're not going to have a civil marriage either. There are legalities there, of course, involved, but it's also just something I'm very careful about, and this is one of the reasons. Uh, one of the things that goes hand in hand. I think we'll come back to that topic later, and certainly the topic of the Beis Din's role in some of the other financial issues. But I wanted to ask just we were talking about a Glock case now. So the couple comes in, they want to get divorced. They've already been through the process of let's say marital therapy, and nothing's working out, and it seems like they're ready to go forward. So what if one of them wants a divorce and the other one's not ready? So how do you decide this? And at what point do you sort of pull the ripcord and say, okay, she's an aguna, and then we call Ora and they start making public declarations. So it's a two-step question. Number one is, what if only one wants a divorce? And number two is, at what point is it clear that we try to compel that going forward? I don't know if we have time to talk about how we do so, but more about the timing.
No, it's a great question. So the it can become complicated. Generally speaking, if the couple comes and it's despite whatever guidance they've had until this point, and obviously they're at the Beis Din, so clearly their divorce is something that is under consideration. If it gets to a point where it's very clear that this is really driven by one of the spouses and the other spouse is really not interested or not on board, and this could really go in either direction in theory. But we have had situations where we will actually conduct a small trial, small hearing, where at a certain point in time it becomes a halachic question, right? We started off this our little conversation together talking about how really it's nowadays divorce is more of a consensual type of proceeding. But in the end of the day, if there's one spouse who's like, I need out and I'm not interested in staying, and the other spouse is insistent that they want to work it out, etc. So we have had times where it does come down to the point where the Beis Din has to make a determination and say that each side should please, share with the Beis Din what their position is, why one side thinks it must end now, and why another side thinks that it should be delayed or that there's more to do in terms of working it out. And if there's really no way for the couple to be encouraged to come to a compromise position together, so the Beis Din will actually make a determination. Now, once the Beis Din makes a determination and says that they think that the get is in place, that it should be given under the circumstance, even if one of the spouses would prefer to delay or not to have the get given at this time. Once the Beis Din has made that determination, so that's, I guess, part two of your question, where you get into the next realm, which is that what happens if, usually this is, this usually it happens that there's if the man is saying that he's not interested in giving the get, but it could be it's a different terminology, but it could be in the other direction as well. And it's
Could I just interrupt for 1 second? Just wanted by way of definition, because I don't know if all of our audience knows, all of those listening to this understand that the term aguna that we asked about means a chained woman, and the way it's referred to today, and Rabbi Rakefet, one of my rebbeim, points out that the idea of an aguna who's chained because the husband refuses to give her a divorce is sort of a newer term. The classical use of the word aguna applied to a person who the husband disappeared. He went on some trip. He went on some business trip, and you don't know where he is, and he's missing. And she can't get remarried because she's technically married to this man, and trying to prove that he passed away in war or some sort of explosion or something like that, some terrible event. And until that can be ascertained, she's an aguna. The Rabbi Kevin noted that today's aguna, he said, was more of the man-made aguna, one that doesn't happen via natural disaster, but one that happens because someone decided that he's not interested in giving a divorce, or because there's some other condition that's placed on it, or she makes it impossible. Something happens that makes it impossible to get a divorce. So that aguna means chained, literally cannot be freed, and then cannot remarry. Sorry, go ahead.
100%. No, thank you. That was a great definition, both historically and currently. Right nowadays, the man-made aguna is definitely the more common one. Although we did have there were during 9/11, for example, was another time was a time in the recent past where the more classical aguna tragedy was also relevant in terms of people who needed to be confirmed to have perished in that, and sometimes it wasn't so simple to do that. But we're gonna stick with the more recent phenomenon, which is not one that we're proud of. But so if a Beis Din determines that the husband should give a get, and then he continues to refuse, so that's what we colloquially then say that that his wife is considered an aguna because she is chained and not able to move on from the marriage, like Rabbi Gelman said. And at that point, the Beis Din, they will engage. Usually, we start off a little bit softer in terms of trying to work with the husband and try to figure out ways that we can make him feel more comfortable and make him realize the significance and the importance of giving the get, and do it in a way that is amicable. That we'll try to we'll try to encourage that to be done. If after a number of attempts, usually about 3 attempts. Sometimes these attempts are formally documented, sometimes they're less formally documented. But after 3 attempts to try and convince the husband to give a get, so then we would generally refer to his wife as an aguna, and at that point in time, the Beis Din would take more extreme measures to apply pressure for the husband to give a get. It's a difficult position from the standpoint of, on the one hand, the get has to be volitional, as we talked about. It's very important. It's stressed as through the process that the husband has to give the get of his own volition. At the same time, sometimes we have to apply pressure in order to make sure that it happens, but we have to be careful that the pressure is just encouraging the husband to decide to give the get of his own volition, and not that he is giving the get as a direct result of the pressure, that the get itself is considered to be coerced or forced. And so those pressures that we have are generally referred to as the harachos of Rabbeinu Tam, which are really a series of social injunctions and the like, to really make an individual who's refusing to give a get someone who realizes that he's really just not a welcome member in the community, and he is not in good standing, and he is not really going to be able to participate in the community in a functional way. From the standpoint of, people are instructed not to socialize, not to interact with him, not to do business with him, not to include him in communal events, not to invite to simchas, not to invite for lunches, not to include him in minyanim, not to include him in shuls, not to have him appointed as in any position. Really a persona non grata, that to the point where it's really an uncomfortable existence. And hopefully the person will get the message that that his stance is just not acceptable, and whatever his grievances are, that this is not the way to voice them, and that's the pressure that will apply. And
Well, much of that depends upon the level to which he cares about being part of the Jewish community. Um, Someone's not really interested in any of those things, that pressure isn't particularly meaningful, particularly if you live in a secular world and you say, "So I gave a secular divorce, leave me alone. What do I have to give it to you?" And it doesn't mean that much. So there is that factor as well.
Yeah, that's 100% true. And sometimes those are difficult cases to address. And there are wonderful organizations that really do tremendous work to help women who are stuck in this terrible situation. And but it's definitely true that there's much more. There's I think the community as a whole, and the Beis Din in particular, definitely has much more leverage over a person, so to speak, who is engaged in the community, and just in this one way is not behaving appropriately, versus somebody who's really not part of the community at all. And those cases can be quite challenging. In those instances, we definitely are much slower to take the more aggressive approach, because it doesn't really seem to be wise to take an aggressive approach to a person who's not going to be moved by the types of aggression that we
Doesn't
can
care if
that we
he,
can
he
apply.
doesn't care if he's not going to get Mafter Yona. It's not.
Exactly. So in those cases, we do our best to try and try to convince, try to befriend, try to encourage. Taking any, we've had, I even personally, in the past year, have spent almost sometimes hours talking to people, talking to a man, trying to make him feel trying to encourage, etc. And sometimes it's successful, and sometimes unfortunately it's not.
Have you ever encountered the opposite, where you would say, where it's the woman is going out of her way to forestall a get process? Because again, classically she has to just accept it against her will, but now we make sure that everybody wants to be part of that. where she's responsible for delaying the process, or the Beis Din determines that she's playing games, whether it's trying to financial games or things like that, and how does the Beis Din respond in those cases?
We definitely do find that there are on both in both directions, spouses will not necessarily always cooperate with what we would want to what we want to see. Um, Generally speaking, at least in my experience so far, and again, I am fairly new at this, but in terms from the standpoint of what we find from women that don't go along, smoothly with the process, it usually does not affect. It's usually not in relation to the get. It's usually in relation to some of the other aspects of the proceedings. But there have been times where a woman has really refused to accept the get, or has tried to delay for various reasons. And we generally, in theory, the same approach really applies there as well. Sometimes the circumstances present themselves a little bit differently, and from the standpoint of you have to weighing why is it happening. So you have to make sure to address you have to really make sure to address what are the real concerns, and figure out what's the best approach. Is it the more aggressive approach that makes more sense? Is that going to lead to a more likely resolution, or is it the softer approach that's going to make more sense? So but we do see it in both ways, but again, usually not as much in relation to the get per se.
Well, I guess that's a good segue. Does the Beis Din then get involved in some of the secondary aspects, like custody or financial types of issues?
Sure. So in an ideal halachic world, the Beis Din is the address for all disputes between Jews, and this includes disputes that have to do with finances, not just because of a business dispute, but even in terms of a dissolution of a marriage, and various financial claims that might arise through that process, and even in terms of determining custodial privileges and rights for the family after the divorce. And so, in an ideal world, really everything should be adjudicated in front of the Beis Din, and we do encourage that to be the case. In fact, we even now have an in-house mediator, so that the couples don't have to just jump right into an arbitration in front of Beis Din, but can actually engage in the process of mediation, which in general is highly recommended, and I think in society at large is becoming a much more desirable method of going through divorce proceedings for many reasons. And so by having an in-house mediator, we have the benefit of being able to provide that service, but also being able to have the guidance of the Beis Din throughout the process, without having to necessarily go through a formal arbitration, so that the Torah values that the couple is trying to implement and trying to work out can be included in that process without necessarily going through a formal arbitration. But the way we structure it is normally the couple will sign a binding mediation arbitration agreement, so that they are committing to going through the mediation process. If the mediation process does not successfully help the couple resolve all their various differences, so then it will automatically be put on the docket to appear as an arbitration in front of the Beis Din. And that decision is because by virtue of the binding arbitration agreement that was signed at the outset of the process, that is whatever the decision of the Beis Din would be in that regard, with regard to these other components of the divorce, would be considered a binding agreement that would be enforceable in a civil court, and it will often result in the marriage settlement agreement, which will then be filed with the civil courts for the purpose of the civil divorce, but was really all adjudicated and decided or mediated in the context of the Beis Din, with the guidance of with the Av Beis Din or the Dayanim, and done in accordance to the Torah principles.
So I think you're referring, Rabbi Kraft, to the halachic prenuptial agreement, right? That's the binding arbitration agreement that is
So,
pre-signed before they get
so
married, or that was something else.
So that's another very important feature. And in what I was just referring to was even if someone does not have a halachic prenuptial agreement signed before their marriage, if they come to the Beis Din and they want to go through the divorce proceedings, they want to keep everything in the Beis Din, not just the get, but the entire proceedings. So we'll actually have them sign a mediation arbitration agreement right then and there to go ahead and go through the process. The benefit of the halachic prenuptial agreement is that unfortunately, sometimes at the point where a couple is ready to get divorced, they're not always in a state where they're acting in a way which is accommodating to each other, and they're not always so willing to cooperate. And so sometimes they're not willing to sign a mediation arbitration agreement that will bind them to the Beis Din process. And so therefore there's no way, even though halachically it's preferable, one or both parties might opt to go ahead and start the proceedings in civil courts. The halachic prenuptial agreement, the
Just
benefit of
point
that
out one thing
is that it is
that may not be in their interest, but but halakhically speaking, Jewish people are required to settle their financial matters in a beis din, right? That is a requirement. In other words, the fact that anyone goes to a court is itself a regrettable one. Forget about how contentious it is, right? Like if you and I were in a dispute over a couple $100, the preferred route, halacha, is to go to a beis din. Same thing is true with two people who were once married.
correct, 100% correct. That is that can't be stressed, more. And I would just add, I might be a little bit biased, but I don't think I'm, this bias is actually one that negatively affects any interested parties. But the truth is that the process of going through the Beis Din is not just halachically preferable, but even from the standpoint of cost effectiveness and in terms of how efficient the process is, the time that it takes, the how smooth the process is. On all these fronts, the Beis Din proceedings are really hands down far more beneficial to the couple who's going through the divorce than had they gone the route of going through the civil courts and dealing with all of the headache and all of the elongated waits and the emotions and the expenses. And often the results are really not necessarily even all that different. So it's halachically preferable, and it's usually even emotionally and psychologically and practically better for the couple as well. But yeah.
I want to skip to just because we're running out of time here. It's just one final kind of two-part question, if you could touch upon it. So often, and we're not scrutinizing the impetus for the divorce. Obviously, sometimes it is involved with another party, a third party, lo aleinu. But um, how long should a person who received a get or gave a get, how long should they wait to remarry? That's A. And B, is there anyone off limits? In other words, once you're divorced, are you then free to go ahead and marry who you like? Are there people who are not allowed? We know about Kohana maybe, but maybe someone else is off limits.
Sure. So when it comes to a wait time, there's only one halachic wait time that is relevant, and this is something that we express at the end of every divorce proceeding. The only halachic consideration is that a woman should not get remarried for 3 months after being divorced. And that's for the very practical reason that if for whatever reason she would if she would get remarried and then she would have a child, by waiting the 3 month period, it would be abundantly clear if she was pregnant from her previous husband or if she's becoming pregnant from her new husband. If there's not a 3 month waiting period, and then a pregnancy would occur, a child would be born, there could be some confusion as to who the father is, and therefore that would be something that would be a challenge from a societal standpoint. So that's really the only halachic consideration. In terms of how long should a couple wait? Every couple is different. This is obviously a very emotional and psychologically draining period, and there are, every case could be very different. So that would be something that from a Beis Din or halachic standpoint, we wouldn't have an answer for. But obviously each person should think long and hard and consult the various mentors and rabbinic figures and psychologists, etc., to determine when the appropriate time for remarriage would be from that standpoint. In terms of potential future partners. So the two main things to keep in mind are, like Rabbi Gelman said, that a Kohen has a number of restrictions associated with their different status as the ones who are reserved for the service in the Beis Hamikdash. And one of the restrictions that Kohanim have is that they are not permitted to marry a woman who has been divorced. That is also something that we share at the time of the divorce proceedings. Also, noting that the Kohanim are really about 5% or less of the Jewish population. So it is a restriction, but it is a small segment of the community. The other factor to keep in mind is that that a couple after divorce, it's if for whatever reason it turns out that it wasn't the right move, they actually are permitted to remarry and marry again if that would be the appropriate result. But so long as the woman was not remarried in the meantime, that would be the other sort of restriction from the standpoint of how as far as remarriage goes.
And a Kohen could not remarry his wife if he divorced.
Right, and a Kohen is not allowed to remarry at all. His wife, his ex-wife at all. Correct.
Okay. This is a somewhat sensitive question, but sometimes it happens. There are rumors. Maybe there was an affair. Something happened in the meantime. And what if anything is the Beis Din's role in sort of making sure are the restrictions in terms of marrying someone who could have been involved in an illicit affair, or is that something that without sort of proof we don't really get into? Well, what's the approach that the rabbis have to that?
Right, that would really be a case by case type of consideration to determine when there would be an impediment to a remarriage. That would be really a case by case determination, which the Beis Din may or may not be the ones making that determination.
Okay. Great. Well, it's about time that we have. I think we've exhausted our time, and I've taken you over a little bit. I apologize for Rick Kraft and everyone else participating. I thought it would be 45 minutes or so. But I don't want to end on that sort of negative note. This is, again, is a topic. It's a difficult one to talk about. We spoke about the Mizbeach being Yored Demos, but also understanding that when Jews learn halacha, we take our rituals and our traditions seriously. So that also is a tremendous zechus that A, in the right time, divorce is a mitzvah, and B, that we should be protected in the merit of our study of Torah seriously, taking this topic with the proper attention, the proper kavanah, the proper context. That we should be zocha to have long and fruitful and happy marriages, and that the study of this should be a theoretical one day, like they say by Ben Soromor or in other areas, that maybe we should have this be a theoretical construct, and that hopefully everyone meets the right person, marries the right person, and continuously works on their marriages, so that way it continues to be the right marriage throughout. And we thank you, Rabbi Kraft, for your time, and wish everyone a wonderful evening. And again, if you have follow-up questions, you can email me them, and we'd be happy to send them over to Rabbi Kraft or respond in time. Have a wonderful evening. Take care.
Thank you so much.